All right.
Sorry.
That's okay. Any discussion on the motion? All right.
Eric, I'll abstain, just since I wasn't there.
Okay, thanks, Reed. All right. Anyone or all in favor of approving the minutes as drafted, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And would anyone like to abstain other than Reed?
I will, since I wasn't there, it's Terry.
Great. Okay, thank you, Terry. All right, the motion carries. Minutes pass. Thank you, Simon. All right, moving on to the. Oh, I skipped the public comment period. Whoops. Does anyone have any public comments that they'd like to share for this week? All right. Okay, so now on to Global Foundries Solar Projects Review. Simon, would you like to give us a quick overview of this project?
Yeah, sure. We've got a few people from the applicant team here as well. So just to summarize I'll let them just do a quick 2 minutes like we
Sure.
do with the discretionary permit, but we got an advance notification letter for 2 projects on the Global Foundries property. One on Mountain View and Redmond, and one up at Chip Alley. These are advance notice letters, so prior to them doing their sort of formal filing with the PUC, this is an opportunity for the town to make any recommendations to the PUC and the applicant. So the way I'm thinking, this is the first one we've sort of done like this as a town. So the way I'm thinking is that we treat this like a discretionary permit pre-app. So you can make your recommendations, and we're going to use the siting policies in the town's energy plan to guide that. And there's really sort of 3 things that are of interest to the Conservation Commission there. So habitat, scenic view sheds, and watersheds.
Thanks, Simon.
All right. Sorry about that, Simon. Okay. So how would you like to go through? Sorry, shall we turn it over to the folks from Global Foundries to review the project, or would you like to review the?
Yeah, so I thought we could just have a brief summary of maybe if we start with the Chip Alley one.
Okay.
So I'll just bring it up here. So scroll down to the location. And I don't know if you, Jake, if you're here, you just want to give a little bit of background to the two projects and this
Yes.
one, and then Mountain View.
Yes, absolutely. My name is quick introduction. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us this morning. My name is Jake Clark. I'm with Encore Renewable Energy. Encore is a Burlington-based solar developer. We've been around for about 15 years. I've been with Encore for about 5 years, and before that, I was an attorney working for the state, representing the state in public utility commission cases like this.
Sorry. Tell you what, we'll just forget about this.
Okay. Can everyone wait at this point?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Just had a bit of an echo there. Well, I'll introduce, this is the Williston, calling this the Williston E Chip Alley Solar Project. It's a 3.5 megawatt project, around 8,000 solar panels, occupying around 20 acres of these fields indicated here. This is on fixed tilt racking, so the modules would be around 3 or 4 feet off the ground on the low end and 10 to 15 feet high off the ground on the high end. The rows are oriented to run east to west. We're required to have an agricultural style fence around the project that's around 7 to 8 feet high. It's got wooden posts and sort of a wide metal weave that allows for a lot of wildlife to come through. It's got a very sort of benign aesthetic. It's not like your typical tight metal woven fence. Our interconnection is to the nearby campus building to the north. And I do anticipate that there'll be you'll need a transformer on the site as well. If it would be helpful for the Conservation Commission, I'm with Encore Renewable Energy, and Jeff Cram from the Global Foundries team is here as well, as is his colleague Warren Coleman, who's serving as a consultant to Global Foundries in this project. But if it would be helpful, I could take a moment or two to explain sort of the high level need and plan, or maybe genesis for these projects. Is that something that would be helpful for the commission?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Jake. Go ahead.
Okay. I suspect that many of you have been following this, but over the past year or two, Global Foundries petitioned the State Public Utility Commission for permission to operate as their own utility, to give them more flexibility to procure their own energy and control sort of their own energy options and their own energy future. In order to operate as their own utility, they're going to be subject to the same regulations and rules as any other utility in the state. This means that they'll have to comply with Vermont's renewable energy standard like any other utility would. One component of that is that a certain percentage of the energy that they procure has to come from new in-state renewable energy generation facilities. Those new in-state renewable energy generation facilities are capped at 5 megawatts. This is the reason why we have a few different projects across the campus. They're trying to comply with the state renewable energy standard like any other utility would. Global Foundries' intent is to build out solar where it's feasible, to limit any impacts associated with these passive generation projects on campus in a largely built environment, largely industrialized setting, rather than building them off campus in other parts of Chittenden County or other parts of Vermont. We see this as a very strong narrative for Global Foundries, for Encore, and a model for Vermont in general. You know, building generation near load or close to where it is consumed means that the impacts of the energy generation are mostly limited to the areas where the energy is consumed. There will not be really any new transmission or distribution, no large public investments in infrastructure, minimal grid impacts for the public or even for the existing campus. Encore and Global Foundries have been working for several months, to identify the lowest impact sites on campus, filtering for the most feasible sites through a host of criteria. These criteria include public views, aesthetic impacts, natural resource constraints, natural resource impacts, including habitat, wetlands, waters, stormwater, agricultural soils, rare, threatened, endangered species, historical and archaeological resources, interconnection feasibility, site access, potential future land use, subsurface conditions, terrain, and topography. So the sites that we're noting or advancing have been selected based on which are the least impact on protected and valued resources and most feasible from an engineering standpoint. So if I'll just one or two more minutes here, if you'll indulge me. Where we stand in the process is where we stand in the process is we've been doing our field work over the past several months. Field work is sort of limited to the warmer summer months here in northern New England, as I'm sure you all know. So those field studies will be translated into reports, memos, exhibits. Those memos and exhibits will be the basis for the CPG petition. And I think, as many of you are also aware, that certificate of public good petition process is managed by the State Public Utility Commission. That's a state level entity, and that CPG process is a sort of a quasi judicial proceeding. With
Jake, I'm really sorry to stop you mid-flow, but I'm having a problem with my computer running the meeting this morning, so I'm just going to switch over to a different one and see if I can just stop these problems. So there's going to be like some of this irritating noise whilst I do it. So apologies for that.
I'll just pause.
Simon, yeah, that's a good idea, Jake. Thanks. Simon, can you just mute whatever computers you have on in the room to reduce the feedback?
Okay, can you
Yes, we have the owl.
This one's finally given up. It's our oldest computer. Maybe its time has come. So, I guess people hear and see now.
Yeah, the owl cameras are working. Audio's seems okay. It may just need you, those of you in the room there, to speak up a little bit, but I think we're good.
Okay.
All right. Sorry, Jake, for the technical challenges. You can go ahead and continue. Thanks.
No problem at all. So the state certificate of public good process, once we have filed our petition, it could take anywhere from 8 to 15 months. It's really comprehensive. It's really complex. It's very thorough. There's not a lot of transparency in terms of how long it will take, but we're happy to keep the town posted on our progress. So the state CPG process, this is, I've read the memo that Simon prepared regarding these two projects, and this next part is sort of in response to that real quick, just to get us started on the right foot. The state CPG process is comprehensive. The State Agency of Natural Resources is a statutory party to every CPG proceeding, and the Agency of Natural Resources with the Public Utility Commission, they cover every possible natural resource element. They cover habitat, they cover rare, threatened, and endangered species, they cover floodwaters, stormwater, wildlife corridors, wetlands, streams, waters, air quality, water quality, soil erosion, prime ag soils. It's really, really thorough and really, really comprehensive review. Now, this is where things get a little bit more I don't know, I think complex. The state generally preempts the town on all of those natural resource elements. because it's a state-run process. So I in reading Simon's memo, I saw that there were a lot of references to the Williston Unified Development Bylaw, the WDB. Section 4.2.1.1 of the WDB specifically recognizes that state regulated utilities are exempt from the Williston development bylaws. So we have to be careful that we don't start down a pathway that would be duplicative and unnecessary, because the state does preempt those bylaws for projects such as this. With that being said, all of those natural resources references and natural resources elements that are referenced in Simon's report and in the Williston development bylaws, all of those elements are protected and very thoroughly reviewed by the State Agency of Natural Resources in this certificate of good process. And once we've completed all of our studies and pulled together all of our memos, we would have given this to you anyways, but we're required to give the town and the Regional Planning Commission the full package with all of the studies and all of the exhibits, and they will demonstrate that we've satisfied all of those natural resource protections and constraints and studies that are in the Williston development bylaws. So with that being said, I'll pause. And I thank you for the time. I know that was a little bit long-winded, so thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Jake. Thanks for the background on the project, and also the overview of the state's role in all this. So I guess I have a question for Simon before we get into the nuts and bolts of the project, and that is, so should we look at this as the Conservation Commission developing a recommendation that the state would consider, as opposed to the DRB and
So
with most of our cases?
you would send your recommendations to the Planning Commission.
Planning Commission.
And the Planning Commission would then decide like what to send to the state.
Okay.
Something we often see is that the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the Select Board, and then the Select Board makes a recommendation to the state. But I've seen it go both ways. And I to bring us back, I like to sort of lay the groundwork in terms of what we should focus on, in my view, having done this many times. The one criterion within Section 248, which is the statute that regulates the Certificate of Public Good process, the one element in that statute where the state does need the town's input is, does the project comply with the town plan? And the town of Williston has taken the time to develop or approve an enhanced energy plan, which means they get a higher standard of deference from the state. They get substantial deference rather than due consideration in this question of whether the project complies with the town plan. And with this Williston enhanced energy plan, there are these siting elements that Simon reviewed and referenced. And those are the elements that I think are really, really valuable for the state to hear from the town, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you, Jake. All right, so commission members, are you, and Simon, are you ready to take a quick look through the memo that Simon drafted? And like I say, is this, we've been referring to this as Simon's memo, but looking at the format, I'm wondering if this is a Melinda memo.
It's my memo that Melinda is contributing to. In reference to what Jake says, like, I've tried to draft it on the basis of what the policies in the energy plan say. So the WDB, he's right, are preempted, and there's a whole load more stuff in the WDB that maybe we would consider on a discretionary permit, but we're not considering here, because I've tried to limit it to those, for your purposes, those three elements that are talked about in the energy plan. And what I think is helpful is that the development bylaws give us a structure to consider. And maybe, maybe it's not exactly what they are held to, but I think it forms a good guideline for the town to comment on these things in a sort of coherent manner. So that said, I don't think we're necessarily going to end up having a massive argument about this. So do we want to just have a look at the memo and we can see what we think? And I'd also add that this is like the first time we've done this, so this is a process that's going to evolve, and next time I'm sure we'll learn from this, and we'll also take the opportunity to learn between now and their formal filing.
One additional question, Eric, if I could.
Okay.
That's just, is that Energy Committee going to take a look at this and make recommendations separately?
Yeah, so the Energy Committee are going to look at it. They're not, they're going to have different things that they comment on, because there's a total of 9 policies in the plan, so they'll probably be more interested in some of the other stuff. I assume they're probably going to push for a recommendation of support or something, because it sounds like something they do. But we can have a look and
Okay, thank you.
so the Chip Alley one, we'll talk about that first. So we've drafted some findings and recommendations. So I think the first one to look at is that this property is not within a scenic view shed. So it's not mapped as such. So we wouldn't normally consider this under this policy or under our Williston development bylaws as being something that we pay a huge amount of attention to from landscape purposes. We'd probably just look at buffering it from neighbouring uses. The applicant has said they're going to do a visual impact assessment, part of which is going to be some screening. Because we don't normally require this discretionary permit, I haven't included a recommendation that they do that, even though they've said they're going to do it, if that makes sense. For habitat, it's mapped as core habitat on our wildlife habitat area. So normally we want some sort of habitat disturbance assessment prepared by a qualified biologist. They've said, I think they're going to do a natural resources survey, and no doubt they'll come up with some mitigation measures that they'll be proposing. We can take a look at those when they do their formal filing. I think this field is generally, it looks like it's sort of fairly agricultural or mowed fairly regularly. So I don't know what's going to be there. And then lastly, we don't actually have this mapped as a watershed protection buffer on our maps. But the applicant's filing sort of, you'll see that channel seems to indicate there is something there, and I think they're planning on doing some sort of assessment of that watershed to make sure they're presumably not interfering with state wetlands rules. So generally where wetlands suspected, we do request a delineation and that they have that buffer in place. And then lastly, just the sort of standard erosion and runoff control plan during construction. So those are sort of summarised in the recommendations there. That we have a whole load of other policies. So things like, the location, it being close to the area it's serving, which I think is an Energy Committee type thing, and presumably as their time directly into the grid is going to be okay. Clarifying how it's going to connect to the sort of grid, and then just clarifying whether storage is available. So those, I feel like those are Energy Committee type recommendations. So I don't know if anyone have any thoughts about these findings or recommendations for the PC, or any questions about how I've done it. Or
Thanks, Simon. That all makes sense to me, and I'll just, for the sake of time, I'll ask the Conservation Commission members to try and limit your comments to the policies that Simon's highlighted in green here on the draft finding and recommendations, acknowledging that the other policies will be covered by other committees from the town. Any Conservation Commission members, any thoughts or comments on those policies? The ones that Simon has highlighted in green. So that'd be the view sheds, habitat disturbance assessment, and the wetland delineation, right?
Yeah, this looks pretty straightforward to me, Eric. No concerns with the recommendations and findings that Simon summarized.
Same here.
Yeah.
Are we just talking about the this chip one? Because I do have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
about
For the moment, we're just focusing on the chip alley, and then we'll switch over to the other project.
Yeah, this one looks pretty straightforward. I had a question for the applicant though. You mentioned at the beginning 3.5 megawatts of solar total. Is that specific to the Chip Alley facility, or is that the Mountain View plus Chip Alley?
That's specific to the Chip Alley array.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. If I could make one or two comments in response to the recommendations.
Yeah.
Sure, go ahead.
Along Redmond Road here, there's a substantial hedge of existing trees and other vegetation. And we don't intend to remove that vegetation. So screening will be implemented if it's necessary. So that's just, I want you to understand that. And on the second, I just wanted to say wetlands mapping is already underway, mostly complete, being confirmed by the state. So that's going to be included in the package.
Great, good to hear. Thanks, Jake.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments from Conservation Commission members on this Chip Alley project? All right. Shall we roll into the Mountain View, or would you rather do a vote on this one now, Simon?
It'd be good just to get a vote on this one if we can.
Okay. Sure. All right. So may I have a motion to approve the findings and recommendations that Simon drafted up for the Chip Alley project?
Yeah, I'll move to approve that.
Thanks, David. And the second was Terry. Great, thanks, Terry. Any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor of approving the findings and recommendations for Chip Alley as drafted, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions?
And Eric, I think Gary's got a problem with his mic, but he just said he voted in favour of the motion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, so motion carries. We're good to go with the finding and recommendations for Chip Alley, and let's move on to the Mountain View Road project.
So this is a smaller project, the intersection Mountain View Road and Redmond Road. So again, we've got findings and recommendations. So this one, you can probably see there from our view shed map, is mapped from scenic view sheds. So the applicant said they're going to be providing a review of the aesthetic impacts and proposing measures to preserve the scenic quality. So you can probably see that's the policy we're working with there. So we do review it and we ask them to include measures to preserve the scenic quality. So looking at selecting and siting equipment to keep it from being the dominant feature of the view shed, trying to make sure it blends into the site, following setback requirements and using the natural topography to break up the mass of the project. So I think they are setting it back 60 feet from both roads. And I think they're also potentially talking about screening measures. So this might be one where we just want to talk about it briefly. Having a look at it, normally we would request street trees on Mountain View Road. And because Redmond Road is more sort of rural and also has a reasonably substantial sort of tree line along the northern part of it, I was going to open it up and see what you think about there. My feeling would be that street trees aren't really appropriate along there. Maybe we could just look at maybe supplementing that buffer. Should probably point out that we did get a resident comment from someone who lives on Brennan Woods Drive, just talking about the view shed, and they wanted to encourage the board to ask for street trees and visual barriers. I don't know if we're going to be able to eliminate the use of the solar panels, but at least help them blend in. So that was the first recommendation. I probably should have also pointed out that I think we would normally, under our bylaws, ask for some more buffers to adjoining residential properties. I think we've got one on sort of each corner of the road, and so we were suggesting a type 3, but we can always discuss that. Habitat, there's a very small element of the site that's SWHA, mainly confined to the northern part of it. So probably shouldn't be too many impacts there, but I think they're doing a natural resources inventory and they'll be assessing whether there are any impacts there. And then lastly, where this is an element where we do differ from the state and we do have a resource that I don't necessarily know is on their mapping, which is we do seek to protect our unnamed streams, which does run along the northern border there, sort of between the two properties, which might have a very small buffer along the northern part of the site. So those are really the three main recommendations. I don't know if you had any thoughts about that. I know David said he had some questions.
Thanks. Thanks, Simon. Questions or comments from the Conservation Commission members? And again, I'd like to constrain our comments to the 3 that are relevant to this commission.
Yeah, I do have a question, and they actually pertain to the town map. And the town map has 2 resources identified on it that are in close proximity to this location. And so, for example, the town map recommends a multi-use path on Mountain View Road for future developments, and I want to know if this project would be applicable to that requirement. And then the second point is that the Conservation Commission has also been looking for better town access to the parcel the town owns next to the river.
The Jacobs parcel.
Yeah, thank you. That I was looking for the name of that. So the Jacobs parcel doesn't have access, and we've actually looked previously in prior commission meetings at areas off of Mountain View Road in close proximity to this, and the Global Foundries property came up in that discussion for possible access points to that property. And I was wondering if Simon's pulling it up. Thank you, Simon. And those are the nature of my 2 comments. The first is probably just a screening question, which is, does the town map and the town's request for connectivity along Mountain View Road apply to this project? And then the second is, would the applicants consider part of that as provision of access to the Jacobs property?
So the town map is, well, the provision of a multi-use path is not within our siting policies in the energy plan. So I don't feel we can ask for it in this case. The Jacob Cran's parcel is a long way away from there. I think asking for some form of access again is not within our siting policies of the energy plan. So I don't believe we can ask for that in this case.
And is our jurisdiction only limited to the energy plan then, Simon? It seems like that's the only point of reference that you're citing there.
Yeah, so that's, the town spent a lot of time drafting this energy plan and figuring out what it was going to comment on for section 248 applications. So those are the three areas, sort of conservation wise, that they focused on to make sure we get it. If we wanted to start asking for these sort of things as part of our review, we probably need to start thinking about whether the energy plan needs to be updated, but we need to have a discussion about whether that's going to affect, that I can't remember the exact term, but our certification that we get for the energy plan being in compliance with state law. So that would be like a different project, I think, to look at updating that.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
cool. I just had one question, and I may have missed this from the beginning because I was having technical difficulties. But now, who will have access to this power? For example, like who gets the renewable energy certificates from it? Would the town benefit from those, or whom?
Gary, the power would be, this is for Global Foundries.
Okay.
So it's,
I kind of figured that, but I wanted to be sure. So yeah, okay. So it's not like a direct benefit to town people being able to, offset their energy use with it. Okay, thank you.
yep.
I have a question about the type 3 buffer. I'm not
Yeah.
sure what that is.
It's just a buffer that we generally use when we're reviewing discretionary permits. So it's a specification of 23 feet in width that essentially separates uses that are like perceived by our bylaws as being incompatible. So quite often use it for, say, residential and commercial and things like that. So for example, a heavy industrial use in the industrial zoning district would have a wider buffer requirement than, say, two commercial uses adjoining each other.
And my other question is, are shrubs included in street trees?
No, they wouldn't want to be. No.
So would there be able to be shrubs as opposed to street trees?
So if we were applying our bylaws to a discretionary permit, we would expect street trees. We wouldn't expect shrubs. We don't normally ask for them along roads like Mountain View Road.
Just I'm thinking of some kind of buffer for instead of tree.
Yeah, I have a question about that topic too, Eric. It might be more of a question for Jake, which is, what types of visual buffer would be most appropriate to balance, the visual block for folks who maybe don't want to look at the solar panels as they're walking or biking or driving on Mountain View, but obviously it's a solar project, so you're mindful of south exposure. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Couple of points. I think the distance from the road to the project fence might be approximately 60 feet. The state typically mandates a 100-foot setback from a public roadway to panels. That doesn't include the fence line. That gives us a lot of buffer to work with for screening. For a property line between one property and another, there's generally a 50-foot setback, which also gives us plenty of space to work with in terms of a vegetative buffer. Vegetative screening, we typically work with a landscape architect out of Burlington called TJ Boyle and Associates. Vegetative screening is never meant to make the project invisible. That wouldn't be like a genuine statement on my part. The vegetative screening is meant to break up views of the project from public standpoints. And typically it's a mix of deciduous and coniferous shrubs and trees. We can plan to provide what's called a photographic simulation. They take a bunch of pictures of the site, photographs of the site, and then they build in layers of the project with the fence, the solar array with the fence, and then they'll build in the screening, the vegetative screening into the photograph. And it sort of gives you an idea of what it's meant to look like. Now, planting really large trees is very unsuccessful. They die. The trees are put in young. So we have to also be upfront about that. The screening, the vegetative screening needs like 5 years to grow in before it's really substantial. That's also an element we have to be sort of transparent about. But a mix of deciduous, conifers, tall, and short is what the landscape architect typically recommends. Does that help?
Yeah, that does, Jake. That's what I had in my mind, but I just didn't know how tall would begin to obstruct the project. Whereas I think most people are looking from, from within a few feet of the ground. So what you described to me, Eric, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, another thing to keep in mind is just that topography can be an element as well. If you're up against a hillside, people up on the hill, the screening isn't going to do anything for people up on a hill, right? So
yeah, understood. Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
All right. I wanted to come back to David. David, did we answer your questions?
Well, I guess it's just unfortunate that we can't talk about the connectivity in the context of an energy plan, because I do feel like town is missing an opportunity here to both address the town map, which requires a multi-use path be part of any development along Mountain View Road. And I guess I would slightly disagree with Simon on the characterization that this is far away from the Jacobs property. I understand that it's not immediately adjoining it, but it's in the same parcel of land. And if you're talking about hiking into the Jacobs property anyways, you got to get in somehow. So, it seems like, for lack of any better opportunity, the discussion should at least be raised and either dismissed because it's, yeah, thank you, there it is. And I'm looking at the right of way on the Velco transmission line there, and then or the connectivity through the existing solar fields there. It just seems like as a commission, we're interested in trying to find a way for the public to access that property. And we've been looking for places to park cars and get easements to walk into it. And I guess this is the first time that we've seen a development within walking distance of that, although it's, I get it, it's not a short walking distance, but things rarely are. And it's pretty landlocked right now. So that was the reason why I wanted to bring it up. I don't know if any of the other commissioners agree with that point, but I thought it was at least worth raising.
I agree, but I guess there's not much we can do about it. Yeah.
So this is hi, I'm Jeff Graham. I'm a senior manager at the facility here in Essex, and think this concept of the Jacobs parcel is new to me, and I'm not clear it's connected to the solar, but I'm interested in understanding what the discussion is and what the needs are. So I'd be interested in having that discussion separate from this part here.
That's great, Jeff. We're working with the Winooski Valley Park District about this. We'll connect offline, but we own this parcel of land which we don't have a parking lot or road access to, and we're trying to develop it as a country park. So
it's a highly underserved area in town in terms of outdoor recreation opportunities. So the town was gifted the land, and we're trying to turn it into a park with access.
Yeah.
Good. No, I'd be interested in hearing more about it.
And
Thank
from my perspective on the development side, in other solar projects in Vermont, I have seen engagement around trail systems being contemplated. So it's a great thing to be talking about informally, I think.
Thank you.
I have a question about wildlife and significant the core habitat. And just wondering, I know all solar projects are fenced in. And I'm just wondering if there's if an animal does get stuck inside of one of these, projects, is there a way for an animal to get out? So, or is it stuck in there? I just happened to see a black bear this morning coming to the meeting. And so if an animal got stuck in there, I know there's ways that if moose this is in Alaska, if they get stuck on a highway, there's a way out, but it's only one way. Things can't come in that way. So is there any, anything like that with a solar fencing array?
The agricultural style fencing that the Agency of Natural Resources typically requests from a wildlife standpoint, it's meant for grazing sheep and other livestock enclosures, and it has tighter openings at the bottom because that's where your grazing livestock tend to live. And as it gets higher towards the top of the fence, the openings in the fence are larger and larger. And I think the way that the fencing is designed, this is intended to be a cost savings because you're spending less money on wire as your openings get larger. And what the Agency of Natural Resources requests is that we install it upside down so that the larger openings are at the bottom. And this allows for more wildlife, to get through the fence. I haven't seen anything like a one-way gate. I think that would be problematic from a electrical code standpoint and our ability to ensure the projects, which are the two primary reasons for enclosing the project within a fence.
And is it just that sheep fencing, I'll call it, or does it have barbed wire? I've never paid that much attention to solar.
There's no barbed wire.
Yeah. So potentially a bear or something larger could get through there, but
yeah,
I don't
I've
know.
I've never seen bear inside an array, but I've seen, things like coyotes inside an array.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Jake, are those fences the fences, are they just straight metal, or are they the metal coated, either powder coated or plastic coated with like the green less?
I think that they're powder coated to prevent rust, but I don't think they're colored. I think it's like a very neutral black or brown.
Okay.
We can arrange for you to see an Encore project with the typical fence installation somewhere nearby if you'd like. I'll try to think of one.
Thank you.
Maybe if you could include some images in your filing, I think that'd be helpful for people to understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can do that.
All right, thanks everyone. Any other questions or comments on the findings and recommendations for the Mountain View Road project?
I'd like to move approval of the recommendations and findings.
Are you guys, what's your thinking on the screening at the moment, we talk about street trees and the type 3 landscape buffer. Jake was talking about a mix of coniferous and deciduous trees.
And shrubs.
Yeah, I mean, what do you want to be less specific on this, I guess is my question.
From my perspective, but the approach that Jake described made sense. It worked for me.
Okay.
Which
So
I guess
each-
is different than what you have in the recommendations.
Oh, yes, sorry, I saw the type 3 landscape buffer, but that only applies to the adjoining residential homes, it looks like.
I would just say that from my end, the view shed when you're heading west on Mountain View is actually to the left, and you're actually the view shed is looking over the ball fields, and this parcel is really just looking at nothing, and it's just so from my point of view, shrubs, high trees, you're not going to obstruct a larger view of the valley or any of its immediate environs, because if you're looking for the view, you're looking off to the left.
Yeah.
So,
Exiting
go as high
Brennan
as you
Woods.
want, and there's no power lines on that side either, so.
Yeah, exiting Brennan Woods seems like the spot where most cars would end up looking at this. That and Redmond Road, which to Simon's point is a more industrial setting. Anyway. So yeah, I like that change to number 2. Just the screening should be provided, and the type of screening can be determined whatever's appropriate for a project like this.
Yeah, they're doing a visual
Yeah.
impact assessment, so.
And Jake, seeing a rendering of what that screening would look like, I think this group can imagine a bit, because we've seen different projects around town, but the public, I think, looking at, if they do research on this, would really benefit from seeing what that rendering would look like. So
All right.
I'll approve. I'd like to move to approve the findings and recommendations as amended. Eric.
I'll
Okay.
second.
Thanks, Reed. I heard a second from someone, but I didn't quite catch who that was.
I think it was Gary. I don't know.
Did you just
So-
refer to yourself in third person?
Well, you guys can't see me, otherwise I would have raised my hand or something. I don't know.
All right, so we'll say that Gary provided the second. Thank you, Gary. Any discussion on the motion to approve the findings and recommendations for Mountain View Road project as amended? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
I
Any opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jake and Global Founders team. That was a great presentation and review of the projects.
Thank you so much for your time. Genuinely appreciate it.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Have a great day. Simon, I think we're gonna have to, or Simon, Reed, I think we're gonna need to table your ERF conversation until our next meeting, if that's all right.
Yep, let's skip it. If for some reason we end up with time at the end, we can talk about it. No offense taken.
All right, great, thank you. All right, so let's move on to the Glazer parcel. Ken, welcome back to the group here.
Thank you.
So today, we are going to review the updated draft memo, Conservation Commission memo, recommendation to the Planning Commission. Is that correct, Simon?
That is correct, yeah. Just loading it up here. Okay. So we talked about this. So we talked about this a month ago. I think at that point, we wanted to revisit it because we ran out of time, and we also wanted to amend some of the discussion elements. So just as a reminder, the specific plan committee voted to transmit it to the planning commission. They're scheduled to hear that on October 5th. The Conservation Commission has been asked to weigh in on the open space that's proposed as a substantial benefit and see whether they agree or disagree. So we've got the motion there. We just to go over the changes that we've made. I've done my best with Emily to make the changes that we talked about. So the first one here is actually in reference to I think a comment Laura made, which I didn't understand properly in the meeting, so hopefully I've understood it now. The difference between like the amount of open space we get for the DP versus specific plan. So that was just to clarify that if this was your regular DP, we'd get the 53 acres of wetland because it's in the RZD, which would be owned by the HOA, and that would be 54% of the parcel. So we are now getting a total of 68.4 acres of open space, which is 71%, the majority of which would be in town ownership, but another 15 acres of wetlands would be in HOA ownership. So hopefully that clarifies that particular question. We also talked about, we spent quite a lot of time on this element. The specific plan committee developed like a specific recommendation for each distinct area of open space. So we have the forested wetland, which abuts Northridge and the Martell parcel. So they recommended that no development. This is an area that will be taken into town ownership, or offered for town ownership rather. So it does have that multi-use path desire running through it. The applicant has accommodated the official by not proposing development that would prevent it and providing a floating easement so it can connect into the path that runs through their development. I've tried to we provided the option for you to agree or disagree with this. So I tried to finesse this a little bit just to respond to the feedback I was getting, which is that you think this is pretty constrained and it'd be very difficult to deliver. And I got the impression you feel that this particular part of the land is not part of the substantial benefits, sort of open space wise, it's compliance with the bylaw. We've also looked at the area of pasture to the south. Tried to finesse that a little bit. I know the commission was very supportive of Windswept Farm, but because there's no certainty they will continue to operate, this should be focused on us being able to facilitate working landscapes with them or another operator, or indeed another agricultural use like a tree farm or whatever. And then lastly, there's the view shed, which we didn't really discuss. So I've just left that recommendation alone. And then this is a table to try and provide some sort of nuance to the sort of how you value it. So each one scores something based on what the town is getting open space wise. So the forest wetland is town owned, which is better than just being sort of designated on a plan. It doesn't have any potential for development, and it probably didn't really have any potential for work in the landscape, so that scores a 1. The pasture, again, better protection, unknown potential for development because it does have some high spots. We don't have the complete delineation. I think Ken has mentioned a few occasions that there might be some high spots. It does have potential for working landscapes, that's a 2. And then the view shed is town owned. It could be developed in the RZD, and it does have potential to be used by, an outfit such as Mosses or another So that scores most highly. I think those were the three main changes that Emily and I made. Hopefully everyone can remember what we talked about. Ken, you probably have something to add to what I've said, because I no doubt I've forgotten something.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Simon. The biggest thing that I wanted to mention was that the last time we were here and talking about this about a month ago, there was this discussion about the way the discussion morphed, as I heard it, was that the Conservation Commission was discussing whether or not the path was a substantial public benefit. And I remember that I wrote in the comments thing on Zoom, as you were discussing, that the path is not part of the proposed substantial public benefit. The proposed substantial public benefit, which is what we submitted in our application and have said repeatedly all along, is the open space. The trail is something else. You know, Chapin Caner, who's on the Planning Commission, this has been a big issue for him. Okay, I understand that. But it's not part of our proposal, and it's not really what, in my view, what the substantial public benefit hinges on. It's the open space, the preservation of the open space, both for the view shed and for the working landscapes, as Simon has already stated, and that it would go into town ownership. So that really is the proposed substantial public benefit. And, you know, what I had asked the Conservation Commission to weigh in was whether or not, you know, you had an opinion and would be willing to support that viewpoint that those in fact would rise to the level of a substantial public benefit. As you may recall, I've stated that the view shed is specifically called out in the town plan as being important. And, you know, that was really the basis for which all of this application was even contemplated as being, you know, potentially viable, was that it was directly linked to things that are in the town plan. So I really kind of wanted to underscore that. Related to that, what I would say is, and I would say this again at the Planning Commission, is that it is very unusual. In fact, it is perhaps one of the rarest of rare things that occurs, that somebody just hands over land to the town. You know, the only example that I can think of off the top of my head, based on my knowledge, was the Mahon Farm, which was given to the town, was part of the mitigation for prime ag soils when Maple Tree Place was developed. The applicant had to mitigate the loss of those prime ag soils under their Act 250 permit, and they ended up, you know, basically deeding over all that land to the town. That's the land that the Allenbrook Park comes out of, the Allenbrook School, the fire station, as well as the big cornfield across Route 2. That's the only one that I can think of. Maybe there are some others. Although the specific plan that was approved for the former Pine Ridge School property, so there was roughly 40 some odd acres was deeded over to the town, but that was linked to the specific plan. When you think about land that the town has gotten, especially the kinds of lands that the Conservation Commission is focused on and concerned about, there's usually been some financial exchange. The Catamount property, you know, did the McCulloughs perhaps leave a few dollars on the table as part of that? Yeah, probably. But there was a check. The Herskowitz property, where there are bike trails, that was also one. You know, did the town get a sweetheart deal from David Herskowitz? Maybe he would have done better had the property developed, maybe. But nonetheless, there was a check that was written. In both of those cases, there were monies that came out of the Environmental Reserve Fund. I mean, you could think of a lot of other examples, but I just bring those to mind, to the table. So this idea that the town would literally just be handed over land for no money at all is very unusual. You know, as Simon has mentioned, the view shed in particular, that 15 acres is all unencumbered. There's no wetlands there. There's no steep slopes. That would be prime land for development, you know, if not for the specific plan. And so if this were going through the more conventional DRB focus process, there's a very strong likelihood that you would, you know, whether all of it would be developed, that would, you know, that would have to be seen. But certainly you wouldn't get the view shed protection that you're going to get as part of this. So those are the points that I just wanted to emphasize, was that number one, the proposed substantial public benefit is about the open space and the town ownership of the open space. As far as the potential trail connection between the Martell property, Northridge, et cetera, across the property, I would just also emphasize that all that land in question is all part of the land that we're proposing to deed over to the town. So what options might there be there in the future? I'm not exactly sure. We know there are wetlands in there, but the town would have ownership of the land forever and ever and ever. And so whatever options might be available, those would all be preserved because the town would have the land and there would be no, the clock wouldn't be ticking. So anyway, I would just emphasize those points, and I would just state once again that we are very sincerely interested in potentially getting the support of the Conservation Commission on this. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Ken. Those are all great points for the commission members to consider. Simon, if you can go back to the document you had up, I had one question on the first on your yellow highlighted comments remarks on the first section there. It looked like, yeah, that last sentence seemed like an incomplete sentence to me. I was wondering if other folks noticed that, or if it's just me this morning. And if we could maybe close it out.
What if it said, not part of any substantial benefit, but does comply with the bylaw, but does show compliance with the bylaw?
That's fine with me if that's what the intent of the sentence was. So I wasn't sure.
I think that the purpose of that was to basically say it's, I guess, like we're not getting, like this is what we get with the regular DP, this particular element, although we do get town ownership. So I think just to emphasize, I don't think you thought that was part of the substantial benefit. So we can finesse that if you like.
I think it's just grammatical. He wanted it
Yeah.
to be a complete thought or complete sentence.
Yeah,
While I'm talking.
I appreciated this addition, Simon. I thought it was a good one. I think it matched the tenor of the discussion that we had.
Okay, so how would the commission members like to approach this? We can go through this one bullet at a time, or talk about the project at a higher level first before we get into the individual bullets. I guess I'll offer that. Does anybody have any high level thoughts, overview thoughts about the project they want to bring up first before we get into the specific bullets? All right, I see Reed's hand up. Go for it, Reed.
Yeah, I was just in terms of thinking about the town getting land for free, which I appreciate that historical context, Ken. I just think it's important to also remember that while we're not paying anything, we wouldn't be paying anything monetary as a town, we would be exchanging a higher rate of development for a number of years. So there is a trade-off for the town there, but it is not monetary, and certainly this is valuable open space. Those are just my high level thoughts.
Thanks, Reed. Anyone else? All right. So Simon, I guess we can go back to the recommendations.
Okay, so I've opened up the Word documents. Just remind me how you want this to be phrased.
I think I would, for me, I would suggest just sticking a period in after benefit, delete the comma, capitalize I, and then put a period at the end of the sentence.
Okay. Sure.
All right, so I guess our approach to this will be for the commission members to approve each of these bullets or statements. Approve, sorry, for each of the commission members to vote to approve each of these bullets, the forested land, the pasture land, and the scenic view shed, independently from one another. So I guess I will go ahead and call for a motion to approve the first bullet, the forested land abutting Northridge and Martell.
I'll make a motion.
I think we're to make a clarifying
you're
point
right.
here, Eric. I think we need. I think what we're.
Yeah.
I think the bulleted item is basically what the specific plan committee has said.
Yeah.
And we're approving the yellow additions, the Conservation Commission to add this statement. And so I think what Simon's identified here is, do we agree or disagree with the specific plan committee? And so I think that's what I believe, that the committee disagrees with bullet number 1. And so Simon has identified disagrees.
I'm asking you whether you agree with the recommendation for the use of a land, which is basically no development but potential future multi-use path. So that's what we're getting for each one of these. But then I think you were concerned about some of the language that they use. For example, you don't think that it's an ample opportunity for a connection point because of the constraints.
Eric, I'd like to recommend that we do just a straw vote on these different items, and if we feel like we have general consensus when we reach the bottom, then we could do a vote on the entire set of recommendations, or what would we call this? They're not really recommendations because it's not a proposal, but
yeah. So straw vote on each 3 of the proposed uses for the open space, and then a motion on the actual overall recommendation to transmit this document to the PC.
Could you load that up just a little bit now?
does that make sense, Eric?
Yep. All right. So
Wait,
sorry about that.
before we do that, we have to pick which agrees or disagrees.
Yeah.
We're straw polling
Yeah.
on.
So so sorry, I was getting a little bit ahead of myself with a call for motion. So yeah. All right. So how are we feeling about this? Now you've blown it up too far, Simon. Can you scroll up a little bit?
Well, I
about
think
this?
I agree with David that like the yellow seems in conflict with the bullet point, or like seems to be saying not quite.
So you're saying that we disagree with the recommendation for the
Or
use
like,
of the land.
Yeah, I guess so. If I have to choose between agree or disagree, it's like
I don't know that we have to, though. I think I could say I appreciate that this was called out, but however, there's big constraints in this piece of property, and I don't know if it should be considered a substantial benefit as a result.
Okay. How do other commission members feel about that?
So this is calling this out as a specific benefit, but the applicant is not saying that this is a specific benefit.
Yeah.
Right, just so Simon just made some edits here. So basically saying the commission highlights that this land is significantly constrained, it'd be hard to deliver. It's not, in our view, an ample opportunity.
I guess
It's not,
go ahead, Laura.
No, it's okay, go ahead.
I just pointed out, I think it was probably a month ago, it's a while, is that it is significantly constrained, but there is a way to put a path through anything. I hate to say, but you know, you can look at the Burlington bike path, and that goes right through Delta Park, and that has bikes, walkers, everything going through it, and it has accommodated the wetlands there to allow wildlife and whatnot to continue to cross over, and it does, you know, it's raised, it's a bridge, and people use it a lot. So there, even though it is highly constrained, there is, and there will be in the future, a way to get around it. It's just money. And that's, you know, and going through a lot of, I'm sure, regulations to get that to go through, but I'm sure in the future, when the time is right and people want to continue that path, there probably will be at a price, a way to do it. So it's not impossible.
I have a slight suggested edit. I think we're using it too many times in this. I think we use it to refer to the WCC in one point. We use it at the end to refer to the, I don't know, to the description above. So I think at least one of them we should perhaps just saying the WCC believes that the opportunity would be better. I don't know what about you guys.
Yep. No, I was thinking the same thing. Thanks, Gary.
Did you have something, Laura?
No.
Eric, what I'm hearing from across the board seems to be that what the specific plan committee wrote in number 1 here, it sounds like the only issue we have with it is the word ample. We support the suggested use, we support a floating easement, all that's fine. There's just concerns about how easily that connection would be able to be made, and we want to make a distinction that we don't view it as part of the substantial benefit, and neither does the applicant was not asking for that to be considered as part of the substantial benefit.
Thanks, Reed. Other members agree with Reed's summary?
Yes.
Yes.
So I almost wanted to say, rather than what was written in yellow here, maybe we should just say that the WCC supports, you know, the items in number 1, with the exception that it's heavily constrained in terms of making that connection, and it is neither part of the suggested public benefit, nor should it be considered as part of it.
So did the committee put that in to try to help sell was that the idea to add more specific the benefits?
I think it was to clarify what they thought would be appropriate for this particular part of the land.
And my view is that it will be probably in the future eventually, but today it probably is not, just because of all the constraints and regulations, but I'm sure in the future it will be. So I don't know how to.
Is it appropriate for us to note that the applicant wasn't suggesting this? That it was part of the substantial benefit?
Yeah. Simon just put that in.
Is that what you were looking for, Kim? What Simon just typed in?
Yeah, I guess I was more asking, like, is it like appropriate for us to note that, or is that like, I don't know, outside of our purview to be referencing? But I like the way it's written, if it's okay with everybody.
And is there a way to put in there that, you know, at this time, there's not ample, I don't know how you would do it.
I mean, maybe
Future, because
I mean,
it's not a dead
yeah,
end.
it's
Right?
not a dead end,
No.
but we're sort of saying that plus
Yeah.
I guess like we're not,
It could-
like at some future point when we develop this path, we're just gonna do it. We're not gonna look back at this document.
Ken, how does Ken feel
I
about
mean,
this?
we could just say, the primitive trail may be very difficult to deliver at this time.
Yeah, yeah, that would work, yeah. At this time.
Yeah, we're there.
Yeah, that makes me feel much better.
So do you like, just,
So I was gonna ask you, Simon, do you need us to agree or disagree with this,
so all I need for definite is the recommendation at the start. So you don't have to agree with this, you know,
Okay.
it's helpful if you do, or disagree with it, but you don't have to. I think there are other elements of this that are more important for you to weigh in.
Okay,
Could I make a suggestion?
sure.
That phrase there that's at the end of the paragraph where it says, nor is it proposed as part of substantial public benefit. Could that thought be moved to the start of the paragraph? So you say, while not part of the proposed substantial public benefit, and then the Conservation Commission could state whatever it is it wants to state relative to the path. Certainly from my viewpoint as the representing the applicant, it seems to me it changes the tone of it.
It's okay with me.
No objection here.
I have one other quick comment. I think the last sentence is incomplete. Well, I think we either have to say it is compliant with the bylaw or it is in compliance with the bylaw.
I mean, maybe could we just delete that? If we're
Yeah.
only really interested in this benefit.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Gary. All right, and then for the text we just moved, Simon, can you add a comment after substantial benefit?
Yeah. Sorry, what do you want me to write?
In the first sentence, which says, well, not part of the substantial benefit, comma, there you go, yeah.
Great.
Just readability. Eric, I'm good with this one now, but Laura looks like she might have an idea.
No, I'm good. I was just thinking about it.
All
I
right,
was thinking you even need to say substantial benefit at the end, but yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
anyone else? Going once, twice? All right, great, thank you. Next. All right, pasture land.
So
I
I
guess,
guess, oh,
go
I
ahead.
mean, we could just adopt the same approach, just have nuanced comments.
David, I have a comment, but David was starting to speak first there.
Go ahead, David.
yeah, thanks. I just want to raise this question that okay, I guess I'll pose this question to Ken. Ken, is the working landscape proposed by the applicant as a substantial benefit?
Yes, it was specifically to support the continuation of Windswept Farm, which we heard, repeated commentary from the public that was something that was important. And then related to that, I would, emphasize that most of what takes place relative to where horses are ridden takes place on the Glazer property. The barns and the physical, the things that you see standing up in the air are on the piece of land owned by the Mazes, but where the trails, most of where the trails and stuff are, that all exists on the Glazer property. And so yes, it was, it is part of the proposed public benefit, and it was specifically aimed towards supporting the continued operation of Windswept Farm.
And
Thank you for that. I just want to note, substantial benefit is the only thing that would fit under in the substantial benefit definition in the bylaw would be open space. Is that right, Ken? Is that what your interpretation is? Because there's no working landscape defined substantial benefit.
Well, working landscapes are part of open space. So there is a relationship. You know, the other thing that I would say is when you look at what, you know, in terms of open space, the criteria for that, there are some specific things that are listed in the bylaw and in the town plan. And there's some language that says, so specific things like the view shed, for example, are specifically called out, but it also says, or other open space assets that may be agreeable to the Planning Commission and the Conservation Commission. The Conservation Commission, of course, is one of the key actors when it comes to things regarding open space assets. So it doesn't, it's not specifically called out in the same way that the view shed is, but there is a relationship there.
Okay. I have another question. Is the and this will be my last one. I'll let other commissioners weigh in. The working landscape and the provision of trails and access, is that open to the public? Like, could I bring, I don't ride a horse, but could I bring a horse and park it in the lot and ride that horse in the trails, or do I have to be part of the windswept farm facility?
Well, so assuming this specific plan is approved, ultimately that would be a decision that would be up to the town, because the town would own the land. And windswept farm would potentially be able to utilize the trails and operate it to the extent that there's a lease agreement between windswept farm and the town. So as an applicant, once we deed over the land to the town, we're out of the picture essentially, and the town's in control. So that would be a decision that would be up to the town as to whether or not what you suggested, David, would be part of the lease agreement that the town might enter into with whether it's windswept farm or any other operator.
I think it might be, you know, maybe an insurance issue, and maybe we could compare this to Catamount.
Yeah, I mean, having talked about Catamount a lot, I think figuring out exactly what the lease agreement said would be take some time, and it would probably have to go to this committee and other committees a couple of times just to figure all that out. And just to add to what Ken said, I think the windswept farm, like momentum, was why this came up as a working landscape. But we do have the, you know, if we decide, actually, you know, if the Mosses move to Florida tomorrow, we still have the ability to implement working landscapes here. You know, we talked to Glen Card. You know, we bought that land from the K. Well, we bought an easement on the land from the K's. They sold it to the smokers, and then Glen Card came along and bought it a few years ago, and he's farming it because we decided to take that option on conservation at that time. So this gives us the ability to do that as well into the future. Yeah.
And what I just to reference Catamount is that, you know, the town has a lease with the outdoor center, and they are using the trails, and they do charge for people to cross-country ski and mountain bike because they're running a business, and they do have a costs associated with maintaining those trails, as to where windswept farm will be taking care of this land, maintaining fences and things like that, and they're running it as a business. So I think those two are comparable, where you can't just show up at Catamount Outdoor Family Center and jump on your bike or your skis and go for a free use, because there is a lease, a business with a lease there.
I've got a quick comment. Do we want to be stronger in this in the sense of requiring a working landscape as opposed, because nowhere in here does it say it's required, it just say the town should facilitate working landscapes. So that doesn't mean it's required. They could do something else with it.
For the purpose of this, I think the town might want to do something different with it. So I don't think you should say that it is just for working landscapes.
I think the reason I say that in the group that I was involved with to put this together, we were strongly saying that it should be required to be a working landscape, and we were worried that the town might do something with it because we feel it's a benefit to the town to keep it in the working landscape. I'm just throwing that out there.
Okay.
You mean
Could I
like
just-
use the land to build a town pool?
Yeah, I mean,
Instead.
there are some
Or dog
areas
park.
that, yeah, there are some areas in there that probably are not wetlands, and that could be a future use of it. Although I think most people would, at this point, would disagree. But I don't know.
Well, that, in the next item, isn't it called out that the view shed would not have, there's a lot of constraints, no pools, no this, that, so.
Well, that's not this. That's the viewscape. This is.
That's
how the
right. I
viewscape
just-
is talking about. Yeah.
I was just saying, they are calling that out in the next
Yeah.
item. But
So what I would add to that is that during the specific plan committee, there was this big discussion, and Gary, you probably recall this, about if the town got this land, what about if the town decided to drop a community center on it?
Yeah.
And that was a big part of the discussion by the specific plan committee about, no, we don't want that. We don't want this for the town to get ownership of the land and then make a decision that they're going to put some, whether it's a pool or a community center or something, some sort of big facility. And that was, I mean, that was a big part of what that discussion was about. You recall that, Gary?
Yeah. That's why I'm kind of saying this. It doesn't seem strong enough to me relative to our discussions, but maybe this isn't the place to do that.
or you could change facilitate to required.
Yeah, I was thinking that, or say to require and facilitate working landscapes or something like that.
And I guess my point might be, if the Mosses do pull out tomorrow, and I recognize that, I mean, the arrangement with Catamount is an organization. Catamount is an established, chartered, board-led organization that will presumably, continue. The Moss family is not. And if the Mosses pull out and sell their property to the town or whatever, what happens to the rest of that? This commission may have different opinions on whether or not a community center or town pool or dog park or working landscape, and I guess the question always comes back to, is this a substantial benefit? And I think the substantial benefit would be, it's a ton of land that the town might be able to put to use in the future, either as a park or a community center or a pool or walking paths or whatever.
Or working landscape.
Or
Yeah.
working landscape.
Yeah, I guess I disagree, particularly from that committee standpoint and from my standpoint. I'd rather see it just left alone, nothing done to it than development on it, because it is one of the unique areas in the town center that would be open.
Mhm.
I think that the benefit here is keeping it undeveloped. And I think there's opportunity other places in town where community centers and pools can be built. But I think this is a unique piece of land. You're not ever gonna recreate it, find it. It is a benefit, I think, is to keep it a working landscape.
For what it's worth, Eric, my view is I would prefer to say nothing about this section and just leave it. I can't say I agree or disagree with it. It's really tough, and I feel like the committee that put this together spent a lot of time reviewing it and looking at it from all different aspects, and I don't think I have any value to add beyond what they wrote.
I like what the committee wrote, and I agree with others who have said that preserving working landscapes is a benefit. And I think like in the broader context of our region and state, it's particularly important. That's like partially coming from like what I see happening to the landscape broadly as a natural resource professional. So I'm okay with this highlighted statement, and I would pick agree, but if we can't come to consensus about this, I also like Reed's idea of just writing nothing.
Let me just make one additional comment. I would not say this is a substantial benefit unless it's mandated that it be a working landscape or mandated to be undeveloped. I think it would be substantial, in my opinion, if it was undeveloped. But I wouldn't vote that way if we just said, if we didn't have any language requiring it.
Gary, would you? I think that's kind of where the origin of my question is whether or not this becomes a dog park, pool, or hiking trails or working landscape horse farm. The larger point is that I guess it's open space, but that deeding it to the town doesn't guarantee that it be open space in perpetuity. And is the word working landscape like required by you, or is it the open space which working landscapes are a part of? Because I don't know that we can guarantee that the mosses will always have that as a working landscape. It could be a country park in the future.
I'm fully in favor of working landscape, but I'd want that to be required.
And even
that answers your question.
And even though the mosses they do have a plan for someone else to take over once they're gone. Right now, that's the plan. But the town also has resources to work with other farmers and other groups to keep it working landscape. It doesn't all rest on the mosses plan for their future, they're living forever. They do have a plan to pass it on to the next generation, but even if they do move to Florida tomorrow and the town does acquire this piece of land, the town does have relationships with farmers and possibly other groups to keep it a working landscape. So it doesn't disappear once the mosses are done.
What if we said the WCC supports the intent to maintain this area as a working landscape?
Yeah,
Period.
that's great.
Is that strong enough for you, Gary?
I like what Simon's done here, and I think this is, remember, this is our opinion. The Planning Commission and Development Review Board can change it. I mean, they can say no, we don't want to require that. But I think personally, I think one of our kind of specialties in our group is to encourage conservation and working landscapes. So I don't have a problem leaving it the way Simon has edited it here to facilitate and require. But you guys might have a problem with that. I don't know.
I agree. I think it's good to add that required working landscapes.
So Gary,
So
with
we're
that language
go ahead.
in there, you would say that at the end there, that you'd say that this is a substantial benefit with the way Simon's drafted it.
Yeah, agrees and is correct.
Yeah, I guess I would. I think I would. I mean, at this point, I think the good thing is they can change it. The select board, the development review board, planning commission, all will do work on this and can change it. If they don't agree with it, they'll change it.
Yep.
Right now, I would stand at agrees and is not, if I had to weigh in on the yellow text.
I would agree and is. Or if you want, do you want to take a straw vote, or do you want? I mean,
All
does
right.
it matter?
So, all right, let's, all right. All right, so, let's do this in two parts. So as it's written on the screen, does the Conservation Commission agree with the recommendation? And that's provided by the specific plan group in bullet 2.
I agree.
Aye.
Agree.
I agree.
All right. All right. So that we agree on that. We agree on agree.
Jeez.
Okay, so that gets us down to the is or is not a substantial benefit. So I guess a straw poll, how do folks feel on whether or not this is a substantial benefit? If with the language there that Simon has ahead of that, the ability of the town through ownership of the land to facilitate and require working landscapes either with Winsett Farm or another ag operator or ag use.
We're responding to is, correct? Like I or
Yes.
nay on the
Yes.
word is.
Do we
Okay, I'm
we
an
feel
I for is.
Yes.
I have one more wrinkle to add to this is that, well, being a little, I think there are quite a few class 2 wetlands in this area, which would mean they couldn't develop it anyways. So that might tend to me to favor it's not substantial, because if it was attempted development in here as our current bylaws are, they wouldn't be able to develop much of it anyways. I don't know. What do you guys think?
And we
that
don't-
is
Right.
that is true. However, remember that we're entering an unknown era with the recent Supreme Court ruling of that wetlands are not part of the Clean Water Act, so that could eventually trickle down into state and local governance.
Okay.
That's
But that's not
just my-
specific to this project. I mean, that could be any
Right.
project could be changed in the future, I guess.
Yes.
Wetland wise, yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
I mean, if we're taking a straw poll, I think we should just either raise our hands or sort of say where we're at. What is that reasonable? And
so-
then we can decide what to talk about next after that.
That's where I was gonna go. So, all right, so I heard Kim is an is. Is that right? Okay.
I guess
Gary?
I'm an is.
Is.
Terry is.
All right,
I'm an
so
is
I've
not.
got,
I'm an is not, and sounds like David.
all right, and Laura, I didn't hear you, sorry.
Is.
All right, so right now we've got 4 for is and 2 for is not a substantial benefit. So unfortunately, we couldn't get to consensus on that one. But we do have a
So-
majority in favor of.
Yeah, wait,
that
hold
feel
on
it's-
for a second there. I don't think we should just cross out is not. I mean, should we mark that as a vote? 4-2 against?
Well, we
I think
were,
we just vote and it's right, isn't that our,
so that was a
Yeah,
straw
yeah,
poll. We
And
didn't
then come back
do
with
a
vote
motion or
on
anything.
the full
but it will
doc.
be the vote 4-2 against is recorded in the minutes, not in the document, correct?
Okay.
Just
Correct, yes, yeah, the recommendation that goes into the document would be that the Conservation Commission feels this is a substantial benefit. But if someone wanted to take a deeper dive, they would see in the vote, in the meeting summary, that it was a 4-2 vote and not consensus. All right, how are we doing on time? 8:50, all right. It'd be great to wrap this up today, wouldn't it? All right, view shed along Mountain View Road. Okay, so this one, can you scroll down a little bit, Simon? This one was pretty straightforward. Does the conservation, at least in the yellow highlight anyway, does the Conservation Commission agree with this recommendation? So here, I gotta switch to my other. I'm only working from one monitor today. It's killing me.
Yeah, it's tough.
The first yellow line, it doesn't mention anything about substantial benefit like the other ones. This one, I feel like is a substantial benefit. So I would like to, is part of the substantial benefit, and
Mhm.
Okay, does anybody disagree with that?
Can you scroll up a little bit to see the rest of it? I mean, down.
So
See the
that,
rest of
this,
it
this
there.
isn't, this
Oh,
isn't
okay, yeah,
relevant.
that's
That's
okay.
not relevant.
Oh,
It's
gotcha.
literally just this bit part that I've highlighted.
Okay, couldn't remember what it was.
Yeah.
I agree with the.
Yeah, agree.
Agreed.
I really wish we
Okay.
could have a dog park there someday, but just.
All right, so they agree, the members agree that this is a substantial benefit. Do we agree with the recommendation?
So you could cross out.
Maybe you just ask if anybody disagrees with the recommendation and that it's a substantial benefit, because that seems like there's consensus in the room.
Okay. Does anybody disagree with the recommendation and the fact that it's or that it's a substantial benefit?
I agree that it's a substantial benefit, but I'm curious the context that this gets delivered to the planning commission, because this is the only unanimously agreed upon substantial benefit. And I wonder how that gets interpreted by the planning commission, you know, given the fact that a substantial benefit is not a singular benefit, it is the minimum benefit, and that the charter actually stipulates that, you know, meeting the minimum is not a substantial benefit in and of itself.
David, I think it was made pretty clear that there would be houses under a traditional development path. There would be houses further into the view shed and potentially at higher
I think
levels.
my interpretation of what David's saying is that I think what he would like is for us to say unanimous vote here, 4-2 vote here in favour.
Oh, is that what you're saying, David?
I just feel like that's not what I understand that like your desire to have your
Dissenting view.
view represented, but that I just don't feel like that's how we operate as a committee. Like we don't do that in other reports, right? Like I
Right.
said before, like we record that in the minutes, and I want to like adhere to the way that our procedures we operate
Sure.
on the
Yeah,
whole,
no,
right? Not
that makes sense.
Yeah.
because otherwise if we do that this time, then like every time someone's like, oh, well, I disagree with the rest of the committee and I want my disagreement recorded so that people know someone disagree, right? Like it will get really murky.
Well, I would say that there is, you know, there's ample opportunities for that in other sort of settings, right? It's like, you know, when justices agree or disagree with the ruling, they have an opportunity to say why they disagree with that. I'm not saying we're justices here, but you know,
Right,
it's
but
not,
they have a procedure that they follow consistently, and so do we. And our procedure that we follow consistently is that like abstentions and disagreements are recorded in the minutes. So you have an opportunity to do that, and it's in the minutes. This isn't like the document's not the place. Someone correct me if I'm wrong about our procedures, but I want to be consistent with the way we normally work.
So-
that is how we normally do it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
to
agree.
the best of my knowledge, we don't have that written down anywhere, but that is consistent with the way we've operated.
Yeah, and David, if there's specific language you'd like reflected in the minutes for your view to make sure that it's captured, we've done that in the past too. People have said, can the minutes reflect, you know, this concern or whatever? So there's context there.
yeah, thanks.
What's the decision here?
I think do we take a strong vote?
I think we need to take a vote since there wasn't unanimous agreement.
Okay.
All right, so, yeah, let's just do this as a real, as a vote. So, all in favor of the, all members, sorry, all members in favor of agreeing with this recommendation, please say aye, or raise your hand.
Aye.
I,
Does anybody disagree with the recommendation? Great, okay. And then, just to be perfectly clear, all members in favor of, the statement, this is a substantial benefit, please say aye, or raise your hand.
I,
Great, thank you. Anyone opposed to that statement? Great, thank you very much. Okay. We got 2 minutes left.
Jeez.
What else do we need to do on this one, Simon?
Well, Eric, I would just like to move that we transmit these comments to the planning commission on behalf of the WCC.
Okay, thanks, Reed. Before we do that, I just wanted to hear from Simon. Is there anything else that Simon feels we need to discuss on this memo?
No, I mean, are you planning on transmitting it like this, or?
How do you think the planning commission would best receive it?
I think they'd like some sort of clarity on the overall proposal as a whole. We've dived into the detail, and I think it'd be good to understand the proposal as a whole, if we can reach that consensus.
I was just about to say that almost sounds like us
Planning
drafting
commissions.
a letter that we all feel, a cover letter that we all feel good about might take more than 2 minutes.
Yeah,
man,
yeah.
or we
To me,
could
that
just
feels
vote
like-
on this, we could just vote on the last highlight, that therefore as authorized by. I think it's weird to put in the I as a person. We could say the Williston Conservation
Yeah.
Commission supports the open space. But maybe that's necessary to put it that way, a specific person, but we could just vote on that if we're at that point, and then we don't need an explanation letter. And we're done.
How do folks feel about that? Gary's proposal. Does anyone feel like we need to have something more involved, like a cover letter?
Do you think that would be helpful?
I think, I don't know what you'd write in the cover letter that'll be different to
Right.
this.
Exactly.
And we'll have the minutes and we'll go over those next time, so everyone can be clear about what different elements of the commission did and didn't support. But just, take a step back and think about this as a whole. I would encourage you. When I got on this committee, one of the things Gary said is like, he likes being on this commission because they actually do conservation. Like, this is what an opportunity looks like.
So we have time, because this is not happening till October.
Well, we've got other things to do.
Right.
We don't have time.
So-
Yeah, let's just do it.
I would be in favor of, sorry, when I made that motion, I assumed that this was included, all the yellow text.
Yeah, all
in
the yellow
document.
text, and I'll pull that out, so it's clear, and we'll make sure it's highlighted.
And then we just take a
Yeah.
final vote on it at the next.
We do a final vote here? I mean,
Yeah, this is the
it's
last
up to
thing,
you. Yeah, this is the last thing.
that last
So-
statement.
Eric, are you gonna call for a final vote? Is that what
So,
you're gonna-
I guess that's what I'd like to
Wait,
do is,
can I just clarify just on this last piece?
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
So, all right, so I guess 2 things. So do we agree that with Gary's suggestion, which made sense to me, rephrase the I move to say that the Williston Conservation Commission supports the open space proposed as part of the Glazer plan?
I agree.
I'm not sure what that, yeah, okay. Anyone else
Yeah,
thoughts on that?
well, agree.
No, I agree.
All right. So, okay, I'm not hearing anyone disagree? Okay. All right, so then, I guess I'll call for motion if someone's comfortable making one to approve this memo as amended.
I make such a motion.
I'll
Thank you,
second.
Gary. I hear a second from
I'll
Terry.
second.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm gonna oppose because I agree that it's open space worth protecting, but I don't think it meets the requirement of the substantial benefit by the charter.
Okay. And anyone abstaining? All right, motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Simon, can you clean this up a little bit and circulate it out to us? Great. All right, thanks, everyone. That was a lot to get through today, but we did it.
Yeah. Take care.
All right, have a good day.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
David, thanks for your dissenting view. It's appreciated.
Thanks, guys.
So our next meeting, so we're gonna meet